The concept of being an artist was not something which interested me at all. For me, Lifafa was supposed to be free form category of music or another personality I could put on. I feel like we've lost a lot of understanding of our cultural sort of norms and ideas. Actually, the concept of a bhajan has so much depth. It's an entire genre of music. I loved the sound of Mohammed Rafi singing with that echo in his voice. I personally feel very close to people who did a lot of it themselves.
Hi Suryakant, welcome to Radio City Freedom.
Thank you.
We'll start off with how was 2022 for you as an artist?
2022, I'd say it's been a year of a lot of transitions for me. So at least as an artist, it usually takes me a few years to finish one body of work, like an album or something. So I'd say 2022 is somewhere in the middle of that. It's sort of continuing the work I started in 21, and hopefully 23 is the year all that comes together and I basically release it. So 22 has basically been a lot for me. Has been a lot about just playing a lot of shows, practicing my craft, but quietly sort of building up to the next thing I do.
And how has it been from the beginning of the pandemic, 2020?
So for me and my wife, at least, the pandemic was more about shifting base. We spent like a decade in Delhi, so we shifted to Goa along with a lot of our friends. So I guess a year or almost a year and a half was just about us sort of getting used to that massive transition, connecting with the local community and just understanding the place we live in. And then I tried to work through the pandemic, but I think there was just too much going on. So I'm not happy with a lot of the stuff we did during the pandemic. And it was like it was full of ups and downs, like for anybody else. But I'd say compared to a lot of people, me and my wife are very lucky. We didn't have any major mishaps. And yeah, I'm pretty grateful for that.
Let's go back to your younger days. And then, the influences that you've had probably to basically take up art. Why did you love art?
I never loved art. So, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm an artist in that sense. So basically, I grew up. My father was in the Merchant Navy, so we traveled initially. I spent some years in Dubai. Then when I was 13, my father passed away like suddenly. So we shifted back to Gurgaon, where my father had a house, overnight. Basically, it was like Tuesday my father died, and Wednesday night we left Dubai and never returned. So I mean, for me, growing up from that moment onwards was it's a new life. At that point I had lived something, and that life was now just gone. So in the new life, I don't really remember how I got through the first few years, but high school and stuff, I think, is initially where I enjoyed taking up the art class just because it was a quiet place and the teacher was cool, and I enjoyed the company of the kids then. But again, it was art as a concept. The concept of being an artist was not something which interested me at all. I was more interested in sort of doing business at that point. Basically, I got obsessed with the internet because I lived in Gurgaon in this quiet sector, and so I got into the business of doing graphics. I started some website at 16. I think it was called parkyourpic.com. This was the hot thing then. People were making image hosting websites. So I was trying to dream about being some sort of internet entrepreneur. So I made that website. I sold it for $3,000-4,000, and I was like, yes, I'm gonna start internet businesses. And then when school ended, I was completely lost because I started realizing that I was just not happy sitting in front of the computer all the time. And I wanted to get out in the world and experience all these things. And at that point, basically, I tried to apply for college abroad because I did 1 year in Gurgaon, and just the environment there just was terrible. I could feel my soul being sucked out of me. By the teachers who had no interest in this. I was joining a design school because I thought that made sense, but turned out it didn't. So I told my mother I need to figure this out. So she's like, okay, let's see what you can do. So I started applying. I applied for a college in America. A few art colleges, I got into 2 or 3, and then I chose the one which I thought I could like sort of go and figure out financially what financial aid I could get and all that stuff. And I would say then I moved to San Francisco for 3 years, which was I think one of the most like incredible times of my life. Especially from Gurgaon to San Francisco was just enough to just jumpstart your imagination. But going there, meeting people, doing things, and just meeting people from the music scene, art scene. I just started dabbling in it. I think from that moment on, I just started learning how to write music at some point, and I don't know why, and I don't know if I should have, but it happened there. Basically that was the trajectory of life, basically.
Right. What happened the first time you went to Amsterdam?
So it wasn't really about going to Amsterdam. It was more about this guy, Edo Borman, who a friend of mine, Rana Ghosh, maybe you know him, introduced me to. And Edo is a really interesting guy. He was just one of the foremost vinyl collectors in Europe. And by foremost, I mean like he had 2 walls by like 12 by 12 feet filled with records, and you couldn't listen to all of them in a lifetime. Anyway, he lived in this very beautiful loft, and I was staying with him for a few days. I was performing some Lifafa music at this red light radio, something there called Red Light Radio, and he invited me to stay with him for a few days. And those were really amazing days because basically he just, over the next few days, he would just like randomly pull out, have you heard this? And it was just beautiful music from around the world, all the cultures, from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, everything. He had such immaculate taste because he would pull something out and he would not only just like put the record, he would choose a track. Within that track, he would say, at 15 seconds till 27, listen to this part. And it was always like, yes. I mean, I felt it. It was just smart, beautiful music, really tasteful, really cool. And that really inspired me. To make Lifafa music in a certain sort of taste. Because he's also a person who I realized, as you're talking about people who exoticized, he listened to music, he did not exoticize it. He had that actual sort of ability to see the really interesting part of the music for what it was, not because it was Indian or from here or that. And I think he was somebody who really introduced me to this idea of making music which is universal, and figuring out how to make it in a certain tasteful manner, or not making cheap, trashy shit in some form. I don't know. He just forced me to like live up to a standard in my life musically, which I'm really grateful for. Yeah, that's what really happened in Amsterdam.
Let us go back in time and look at how Lifafa came about.
So I'd say I had spent basically, at least as I started working in the field of music, I spent the first 2-3 years of that time working on Peter Cat, just learning how to produce music, record music, simultaneously learning how to finish lyrics, songs, then perform it. So all this was taking up a great deal of my time. And then at some point in the middle, I think the girl I was dating at the time was somebody who listened to a lot of music. And she started listening to some really interesting electronic music from the UK or Europe. And up till then, I was also sort of one of those people who really understood electronic music through the prism of dance music or like techno or trance. Not that I listened to it, but that's how I had sort of perceived of it. And then when I started listening to this, I was like, wow, there's this complete different universe of music being made. And I want to get involved in it. And it was just something new, exciting to learn, new tools, a new way of making music. So I got into that and started trying to emulate stuff like Aphex Twin and all these sort of classic people. I really didn't understand how they were making that music at that point. But exactly, like sort of listening to that and trying to trace the process of how to make that. For me, Lifafa was supposed to be a sort of free form category of music or another personality I could put on, where I could work on that, and on the side I could keep a certain part of myself focused on Peter Cat, because I did want to make a career out of it. I did want to make a living out of it. So that required a certain level of dedication and precision. But I simultaneously needed to have this sort of canvas where I could keep moving myself forward as an artist or just a human.
Why the moniker Lifafa?
Oh man, there were some options.
Okay, can you have the options as well, please?
I think it eventually came down to Lifafa or Bulbul. And my girlfriend at the time was like, no, Bulbul. It's just weird. It's just weird, kind of dirty sounding. I don't know why, but Lifafa, I for some reason I was attracted to the word. I also like the fact that it was sort of it was friendly for anybody to say it. You see, my name is Suryakant, and I've always suffered around the world from people being unable to pronounce my name. So if I have a kid, I mean, it's gonna have a damn easy name to whatever. I appreciate this name, but it's been a pain in the ass. So I wanted something which anybody could pronounce, like somebody from China all the way to America, all across the globe. And Lifafa, I felt like had all the correct consonants, and anybody can say it. And it has this sort of weird, the sound could mean anything. It had this weird cosmopolitan sound.
Right.
Except for obviously Delhi speakers who was like, Lifafa? Kude ka hai? Kiska hai?
So with Lifafa, you kind of Indianized your music, if that's a word. Was that a conscious effort?
Yeah, it was a very conscious effort. I think I have all these fantasies all the time. So one of these fantasies was, obviously I'd listened to a lot of old Bollywood. I really loved old Bollywood music. I really loved 90s Bollywood. And like so much stuff, I really did not connect with music from Bollywood once the 2000s happened. There were some great songs here and there, like some people were producing. But again, it just became the odd song here and there, which I really liked. So I started having this sort of idea that I wanted to create a alternate realm of what Indian music, alternate history of what Indian music should have been, could have been, I feel like we lost a lot of understanding of our cultural sort of norms and ideas. Like bhajans, for example. My mom obviously listened to a lot of bhajans when I was young, and I really loved them. And I just found that that's a missing component, other than used as in some, film. It's still used in some Bollywood films, but actually the concept of a bhajan has so much depth. It's an entire genre of music. It's not just about Raghupati Raghav Rajaram. It's about what the trance. It's a complete thesis, PhD topic by itself on trying to understand what a bhajan really means. So something like that. And then there was these obviously like Indian classical music and then folk music, and I just felt like there has to be a way of sort of recreating these, remaking them in a new way, just imagining a completely new version of Indian music culture. And I wanted to do that as Lifafa. And I also wanted to just do something completely different from Peter Cat, even more. And I didn't want to do anything European oriented, anything. So the most obvious place was to go back to where you're from and really just start asking those questions. And yeah, it was a very conscious effort in that sense.
Right. Who have been your influences for Lifafa? Like in terms of not just music. I mean, I'm sure there are other forms of art that have actually influenced you as an artist.
Oh.
Or did you want to shy away from influences because you wanted to just create something that you genuinely believed in?
There are some very obvious things I really enjoy. I think I don't really have specific influences. I have specific ideas of what an influence is. Like I loved the sound of Mohammed Rafi singing with that echo in his voice, for example. That's an influence. It's not Rafi himself necessarily, but like the way he was recorded and the way he sounded on a record, Because when in the late 70s, 80s, when the recording technology got different, his voice changed, then we could actually hear him more clearly. And he still had an incredible voice, but it didn't have that same thing. So I really like that saturated voice. I really like that. I really enjoy the sort of mood which old drums sound in the 60s or 70s. But I also simultaneously love how techno music sounds in a club. the way the bass. So there's all these, the influences I have are sort of these fragments of reality which I pull out and I try to insert. I wouldn't say like I love Pink Floyd and I liked this one or two lines of this song sung a certain way by Sid Barrett, and I really loved that. So it was always like that for me. So that's the way I get influenced basically. I really take small things and I try to integrate them into my own music. But it'll be very hard for me to point out somebody who's specific. I would say like there have been so many that it's impossible to like say one person like or one group or even small groups. But I really respect. I personally feel very close to people who did a lot of it themselves, like auteurs and like bands which recorded themselves or musicians. I have some sort of affinity for that. I don't know. It's this sort of rebellious sort of way of doing it. So that's what I